Call the meeting back to order. And next item of business is Jeff Peters, our financial advisor. And we got a couple of items here on the agenda. First of all is the fiscal plan, which the draft of the fiscal plan was in your packets. And Jeff is going to go through those.
Thank you all. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and to help. As we've talked about over the last several years, the development of your fiscal plan is to try and give you some perspective as to what your financial condition looks like, not only today, but looking out 3 years into the future so that you can make proactive decisions about what you're going to be undertaking for both capital, operating needs, et cetera, and what your revenue streams look like. So the plan that we sent down, it was updated for the growth factor for pay 2023, which is, as we've talked about before, your maximum levy for property taxes grows based on the 6-year average growth of non-farm income. And that number gets certified late in June, July, typically. And that number was included. It's up to 5%. Previous year was 4.3. So you do have more property taxability coming forward to you. That has been implemented into this plan. And what is not in the plan, but has happened since we sent it up, is we have an initial certification for local income taxes. When we develop our income tax models, we always try to be conservative. I don't want to show you more revenue than I think potentially you would get. But the new certifications of income tax, and again, they're not certified, they're the initial certifications. They may change, but typically in the last few years, we have not seen them change. The general fund would pick up about another $230,000 a year in income taxes. Public safety would pick up about $72,000 extra a year, and economic development about $73,000 a year. So it looks a little better than the plan that you have before you. The plan you have before you looks at a 3% growth factor in the operational sides of the budget. It has substantial cash reserves in the general fund, and several years ago that was one of your objectives, was to develop a cash reserve structure so that you would be in a good position to absorb any ebbs and flows in revenues and expenditures as you went through other times. The operational model is fairly well balanced with that 3% growth factor between the operating funds of general, public safety, lit, reassessment, and your health fund. There is a slight imbalance in the public safety income tax fund, in that you are currently allocating more expenses to that than you have annual income coming in and anticipated to come in. Now, those expenses, when you originally implemented the public safety income tax, you carved out expenditures out of the general fund and put them over there. So these can easily be moved back to the general fund as you need in order to balance. It is not something you need to do immediately because you have cash reserves in both places. But you may want to consider, as you go forward, allocating some of that public safety income tax expense back into the general fund. The other operational budget that is out of balance is the motor vehicle highway fund. Let's see. That's on about page 18. Page 17 is the summary part. So anticipated expenditures, again, if we look at the 22 budget compared to revenue, you are consuming cash and projected to consume cash over the next 3 years to the point that it would become unfundable in 2025. Now, alternatives to that is you can reduce expenditures or increase revenues. From the expenditure side, obviously you still want to be able to undertake those projects to make sure the roads are safe and up to the level that you need to properly serve your people. From the revenue side, you have some options to you. I think you're going forward and talk some about wheel tax and surtax. You also might look at a couple years ago, the legislature had you split out your motor vehicle highway funds between operational and restricted. You can undertake restricted projects with your own staff. So we've had a lot of people will look at how do we fund those projects internally and then pay for some of those personal services expenditures of our own people out of the restricted fund. You may want to look at that mix to see if you're accomplishing that, to move some of the expenditure for personal services through the MVH restricted fund.
I can tell you we are already doing that.
Okay. The MVH restricted funds on page 20, it has some cash reserve in it, as well as appears to be somewhat balanced to the revenue. In addition to that, you can look at funding MVH projects through like CEDAT funds. If you have a project that you want to undertake that would alleviate some of your MVH budget, you might want to undertake that and pay for it through the Economic Development Income Tax Fund. But all in all, again, you are well positioned to go through your budget process and do what you need to do for 2023. Your beginning cash fund balance for 2022 in the operating fund was about $11 million. One thing that everybody's going to deal with, particularly this year, is how much do we raise people's salaries in order to retain them, in order to not have to train a whole bunch of people. And those are typically taking up everybody's budget increases. Where in here I say we've got a 3% increase built in for all the categories. That may not hold true this year as you look at personal services, fuel budgets, things like that. If you do have to go above and beyond that, you have the cash reserves to do that. That's not a problem. What you'll need to do as we look forward, depending on what the growth model looks like for income taxes, property taxes, et cetera, you may have to scale back some of those future budget increases in order to come back into balance in a future year. But again, this is part of your strategy of creating that cash balance, is to work through these ebbs and flows and not have a crisis situation where you actually have to lay off people or not give raises and have them go elsewhere.
And Jeff, the target amount that we have been striving for each year for these last 4 or 5 years is what percentage of our budget?
It should be about 30%.
That we're actually saving somewhere close to half a year budget, or?
That 30% would be a little bit less. And again, we would look at all the operational funds in order to do that. And again, that's more of a cash reserve. So at this point in time, you are above that.
Right. And that is something, we were well below that when you started with us, and we have moved in this direction. And that's part of the information that Susan is preparing for us next week, so that we will see how our changes affect that cash reserve percentage, because we want to keep it as close to that 30% as we possibly can.
And with that, I'd be happy to answer any specifics on the fiscal plan or general thoughts.
The other counties that you're working with, do you have any general idea as to what kind of percentage increases they're having to give in personnel, or is it close to the 9% inflation rate?
I've heard, and I don't know if this is specifically county, but we do a lot of cities and towns and stuff as well. Probably the number I'm hearing most is 7. 7 is still a huge number.
Yes.
It'll be hard to digest that going forward. But yeah, I've heard those inflation numbers at 9. I've not heard anybody even entertain that, just because I don't know how long it would take to recover that. And those are, alternatives as you go through your budget cycle. If the auditor's office puts together some different scenarios, we can run those fairly quickly through the fiscal plan, see how far upside down you might be at that point, if you want to do those hypotheticals going forward.
I'm sure that we'll be wanting to see some of those numbers next week. Donna, did you have something? Did you have a question? I know one of the issues that we're going to be looking at from a county council association issue is this unrestricted MVH funding with the legislature, because that's put a strain on many counties as to what is available to operate our highway departments. And with us, talking about building a new garage, we are looking at a wheel tax. I have provided some basic information that you had sent to the council so that we can possibly look at a wheel tax within the next year. Certainly, we can't do anything that will cover 23. It is, if we were to go with a wheel tax, it would have to be implemented before the end of this month. That's not going to happen. So over the course of the next few months, we'll be at least considering it, not proposing that it be passed or not passed, but we would at least consider it, because we do have, this is one area here that we're having an issue, and there is this separate funding. This is not general fund money, it's highway funding. I don't know, any other questions? The issues he's brought up? Hearing none, let's move on to the other item that I put on here, and that is with the highway garage, the commissioners are talking about a build, operate, transfer option. Can you kind of explain to us what that is and what's possible or not possible there?
I can give you kind of the big overview and the selling points that they typically bring forward in a bot. We have communities that have done bots for different things that we've been involved in, just using their current revenue streams for certain bot expenditures, like in the form of TIFs and building spec buildings, to doing fire stations, municipal buildings that we have helped in the financing or taken out the financing of the bot. And a lot of times with a bot, they will bring you forward an entire package and say, oh, here's this great thing. You just sign up, we'll get you financed and all this will be done and well and good. Second part of what I'm going to talk about is kind of splitting the finance portion out of the bot. The bot, and I think the things that are most appealing that they bring forward is they can have economies of scale where you're building one county garage this year. And this will be the county garage that you've built. The last one was what, 30, 40 years ago, maybe? So, yeah. Once in a lifetime, once in a generation building project for you. The bot person may have 30 of these projects. So they're going to have some economies of scale when they go out and say, okay, you're not going to just brick this one building. You're going to brick all 30 of our projects that we're doing. So they claim that they have those economies of scale, those savings for you from the construction side, and that they share that with you. The other thing that they talk about is selecting vendors. When you go through this bot process, you have this RFP. And as part of that RFP, you can kind of pick and choose if you have certain vendors that you do want to work with, don't want to work with. It kind of fits into the RFP that you write so that you don't get caught necessarily with the lowest bidder. Because when we go into public bids, what I understand is a lot of times it is hard to exclude a vendor that is not as good or that you would not want to work with for your project in a public bid because they come in low. The other thing they talk about in bot to pitch is that they have a fixed cost. Once you go through the RFP process and you select them and you go through the scoping of what your building and such is going to be, they fix a cost and say, okay, this is what it's going to be. We're not going to have any cost overrun. That is nice from a finance and a cash flow perspective, that you know what the cost is going to be before you start a project. The alternative to that is when people do, design, bid, build, you typically build in a contingency as the owner of what you think that project might deviate by, and you build that into your budget and cover those expenses if you need to. But it is nicer to have a fixed cost up front that they're going to absorb any loss. Now, part of the pricing, I'm sure they price that in as well, that they're going to guarantee that price. So looking at the bot versus the designed and bid build, it's not necessarily an apple to an apple, but you may want to look at both of those examples and kind of see how you think that gauges out. The bot people have laid off some of this from the finance perspective, and a lot of it has been a pushback because we've seen bot people throughout the state present basically a turnkey option to a unit of government. And they say, okay, we've got the whole thing for you. All you have to do is sign and we'll go forward. And they'll end up with financing components. We've had people or units of government that have entered into bank loans that after a period of time go to a variable rate that is substantially higher than what they would have had as an interest rate in the beginning. So the finance costs, the potential finance costs are astronomical and a risk that you would never want to undertake as a unit of government. As we talked about before and as we've done your financings, we look at how is it that we can best guarantee your repayment so that when you go out to the market, you get the most favorable interest rates. And just to give you kind of a perspective, if we had a $10 million building financed across 20 years, each 10 basis points or 0.1% is about $130,000 in interest costs. So if they go to the bank, banks typically only want to finance stuff to about 10 years. Now, they may be talked into financing something for 20 years, but then they're going to charge you a premium, or they're going to have this variable rate that kicks in. So bank financing typically in any large project of a government nature loses out to the open market. And we see this over and over again. And that's why we will typically, when we work as your municipal advisor, we'll bring in an underwriter or we'll go out to the open market and we will sell that so that it gets cut up into all these little pieces and everybody buys the little part of it that they want. It's just a lot more efficient process and the interest costs are lower than going through a bank. So for bots, you can separate the financing part from the bot. You can use the bot as the delivery method to get those economies of scale, that fixed cost, any of those components that you want. And then we can integrate it with normal financing. The one thing, and what I say about normal financing is using a municipal advisor. We, as your municipal advisor, serve as your fiduciary. We make sure that you get the best deal, even if the bot people brought you an underwriter. The underwriter's job is to sell the bonds and sell all the bonds out into the public market. They're not looking out for your best interest. Now, it'll be probably somewhat close because obviously underwriters that would take advantage of units of government wouldn't be in business very long. But again, when we're looking at 10 basis points or each 10 basis points is $130,000, we make sure that the underwriters present everything the way we want it presented for your best behalf. To make sure that you get those lowest interest costs and you do the best in the market. So I would advise you, if you go through a bot process, separate the financing, continue to use a municipal advisor. We would hope that would be us, but use a municipal advisor because you will get a better interest rate and a better product for the long-term financing. The other specific thing to kind of talk about the highway garage, my understanding is that you're looking at paying it out of the Economic Development Income Tax Fund. You do have, looks like sufficient revenue stream that you could do that. Your Economic Development Income Tax stream is a good security. However, if you remember when we did the Community Corrections building, we used the primary revenue stream of your income tax for correctional facilities. But we backed that with the property taxes of the county. So if at any point in time that income tax stream is insufficient, it goes on the property tax rolls. That is your best security when you go out to the market. And a lot of times you may see a difference in bond rating and interest rate costs based on using income tax versus property tax. Which again, it might be a one basis or a one step change between a double A and a double A minus, something like that. But that still would probably be another 10 basis points on the rate, so there's another 130,000. So I would recommend if you go with the edit as the tax, go ahead and pledge your property taxes underneath it, so that you get, again, better interest rates, even though you have no intent of ever putting that on the property tax rolls. You have that security available to you. It would be a good use of it. Second specific component to kind of think about with the highway garage, you have a general obligation bond cap, and I know we've talked about this in the past. It is 1/3 of 2% of your net assessed value. And that number, based on 22's certified AV, is about $18.7 million. Counted against that today is the community corrections bonds, where they have an outstanding balance of approximately $4.74 million. And the GO bonds that were refunded have an outstanding balance of $1,325,000. So as of today, you have a general obligation bond cap available of about $12.7 million. So if you did a $10 million project, that would fit within that bond cap. However, I would ask you to think about what are your future projects. Do you need to spend part of that GO bond cap for future projects? If so, then what you may want to do is structure this into a lease rental. Whenever a unit of government cannot fund all their capital needs under their general obligation bond cap, and this is basically where all schools lie. They have far more capital needs than will ever fit under their GO bond cap. So they set up building corporations and do lease rentals. The building corporation technically issues the bonds, and then there's a lease agreement between the building corporation and the county. The county still gets to levy property taxes or use income taxes or whatever to make the debt service payments, but the amount of that debt does not count against your GO bond cap. If this highway garage is a new building and a single standing building, that would make it fairly easy to lease. So if you have other projects that you think might not be as easy to lease, you might want to run this one through a lease rental process in order to retain your general obligation bond cap.
I thought that was the whole idea of doing a bond, is it would be lease rental so you can keep that bond money or bond cap available.
If the bot is not structured as a lease, it will count against your GO bond cap. And we've had them done both ways. But again, up front, yeah, you could do a bot through the form of a lease and keep it off of your GO bond cap. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about, like I say, I'm no bot expert, but yeah, my biggest incentive or statement to you is look at the bot financing separate from what the bot people may bring you, because they're trying to sell you a project and build you something, irrespective of what the financing advantages are or the intricacies of financing.
You first said a while ago, you had suggested if the bot avenue is chosen to separate the financing and what was the other?
Finance the bot, the delivery method of the bot versus its financing. And again, it's not necessarily separated. It's just don't let the people who are selling you the building do the financing.
If we went with a bot, we would be securing it with property taxes then, is that correct? What you stated that would be the securing factor?
I think the initial thought is that you're going to use the economic development income tax as the repayment stream. So that would be the first security. I am advising you to pledge property tax underneath that as a backup security to get a better interest rate and a better bond rating.
And that's what we've done with community corrections.
Correct. But that gets you your best appeal in the market, your best bond rating, and your smallest insurance or interest costs.
So I guess I'm confused on the whole bot system. I thought it was an investor that had the money, it's not going to go borrow it, that's going to build this, have us lease it from them so that they can gain interest on that investment through that lease. So they possibly wouldn't be financing, correct? I mean, do all bots have to be financed, or do some people just have the 10 million and they're saying, well, this is a safe avenue for me to make interest on?
I have not seen that structure, but thinking about it theoretically, I think you could have a developer actually come up and step up and be the bank as well. Now, I'm sure they're going to want some return on their investment. I'm assuming they're going to want it tax exempt. So they're going to have you as the municipal user and you as the tax exempt entity sign on to some sort of repayment stream that gives them that return. But yeah, I mean, if you had somebody that would step up and had interest rates low enough that it would equal what we would get in the market, yeah, that would be great. I've not seen that before.
Any other questions about bot? going to be a very difficult month as we get into this budget. Last thing on here, again, I did send them information on the wheel tax. Anything you want to say about the wheel tax? Because as you've pointed out, our one place where we may go upside down is in our highway fund. So, again,
You know, most counties have gone, I think, to the wheel tax. And I probably shouldn't say most. I haven't actually looked at the total of all the 92 counties, but it appears that most of those that we have worked with over time have gone to the wheel tax. In order to make up that operational and capital need deficit of roads versus the funding that comes into it. It has, you know, I've never been in a community that doesn't have an entire list of roads that need to be resurfaced, redone, rebuilt, that are far beyond money that will ever be there. And in the form of, you know, cities and towns, we will routinely go out and issue bonds with property tax repayment in order to do roads. Now, you don't have that ability necessarily in a county, other than I think there's one statute, it's at 36-941, and it's a public works loan. I think you can do a $2 million project, up to a $2 million project, put it on the tax rolls and repay it across a 10-year period. And that includes roads, streets, alleys. It's all defined there in the statute. But, you know, again, we always see communities that have far more road needs than they have funding. And this is just another alternative to try and spread that cost across the people that use it and help fund those needs.
even though I've only just briefly looked at the information that you provided us, you know, one of the things I mentioned last month was I did not want the public to feel that we were considering a wheel tax to pay for this highway garage. There is information in what Jeff has provided that states that the wheel and excise tax must be used for the resurfacing or maintenance of the actual roads, not for the funding of the building or other expenses for the highway department. So whatever, if we were to consider this, if we were to pass it, and again, if, it would definitely have to go towards the actual roads itself. All right. Anything else for Jeff? Jeff, thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Thanks for
all
having
the
me
work
up.
that you
Appreciate it.
do, and I'm, you know, we'll keep you on speed dial next week as we start going through the budget.
Look forward to it. It's that time of year. Thanks again.
All right. Last is our discussion. And unless somebody's got a question about the wheel tax issue, that's the one thing listed on here. I do have a couple of other items. As we look into the '23 budget, we have made a change, of course, with community corrections, in that it is now more or less being administered by the probation department, which has brought them some economies of scale and has been helpful in their budgeting. But they still have, the majority of the funding does come through a Department of Corrections grant, which they have had to submit, and if any changes are to be made to that submittal, they have to happen the day after our 2 budget meetings next week, which is not going to give them much time. Now, up through the beginning of the community corrections, up through right now, we have dedicated $125,000 to their budget. as the county's commitment. Now, that current money is coming out of the correctional facilities tax that we're collecting to pay the bonds that built the building. So in the future, that money will go away, and it will have to come from the general fund. Because we know that is coming, and with some of the changes that we've made, one of the biggest expenses that the community corrections has is the healthcare insurance, which is county healthcare insurance. In order to balance that budget, I have met with them, as has Commissioner Watson, and Amy, who is their liaison, was talking with them last week, but we've pretty much committed that in the future, that amount of money that we dedicate to community corrections would be the dollar amount for their healthcare insurance. So because eventually it's going to have to come out of the general fund anyway. What will happen in the future, if everyone here is accepting of that, is that there will be the healthcare insurance amount minus the 125, and that difference is what will come from the general fund. That will be our commitment ongoing, and it will, I think, be easier for us to deal with in the future if we have that one item, rather than picking and choosing percentages of different line items. We've just got that one thing that we have to deal with every year as being our commitment, which goes a long way with the Department of Corrections in awarding those grants. So that's the decision that we will have to make next week when we're meeting with our department heads. Bottom line, our budget's not going to be finalized until September 27th. But because of the deadlines that others have put on us, we're going to have an answer for community corrections next week. So that's just so that you can think of what I would ask Susan is you send us all the dollar amount that healthcare insurance will be, so that and that's being built into the budget right now. So you all will have that information. So, and the other item is, and this information was all sent to you, forwarded on from emails from the county attorney, Jim McCanna, reference the bonds, or the TIF bonds, for the sports park. This has a number of steps to go through, but in that packet of information that was sent to you, you have a timeline. One of the things that it has to go through before it gets to us are the commissioners. And then it will come to us for a vote on September the 27th. And the one thing that I think that we all need to understand is that whatever these bonds are, whatever amount, in any shape or form, they in no way obligate DeKalb County to repay any of these bonds. This is strictly an issue for the owner of this sports park and the user of those bonds. So I can't, actually, I know we're not responsible for the financing. That was what my big concern was, is that we would be responsible for the repayment of. But Don, if you can you help us at all in this? And it is, right. Right, and was 80% the lower amount?
Can you explain that? I'm
Because I
sorry,
know that Kevin Webb, who's on the commission, had said that he they actually were committing less than the group wanted.
Well, yeah, it actually calculates out to 77% or something like that. They capped the bond amount at 18 million as opposed to just a straight 80% TIF revenue pledge.
When you say a pledge, that means it's yours then to get financed. Use that.
We couldn't use it, we couldn't use it anyway.
Paying it with that. They are going to pay you back the bond with that, but it's security that they're.
They are going to use that money to pay back the bond. That's why they're requesting.
Wait, can you say that
the-
again?
the
I'm
TIF
sorry.
The
I
TIF pledge.
was trying to listen to you, trying to figure that out. Can you say that again?
So they would be using our, the tax.
Yes.
The owner would be using,
Yeah.
And the remaining 20% is there for infrastructure improvements, is what they're retaining money for.
Millennium Steel. Yeah, Family Dollar, too, yeah. Yeah.
And the redevelopment commission, when they did their motion, they're not giving all of their revenue for that. They're still keeping some of their revenue that they would receive each tax time.
Which would be for the infrastructure.
when you say infrastructure, when you say infrastructure, Rick, what do you mean by that?
Water, sewer, roads, the area covers what we would like to see is a roundabout at 11A and 427. I have actually approached the chairman of the commission to help us fund the repair and maintenance of the tunnel that goes underneath I-69 between the two sides for the bike trail. So those types of issues. Now, the water and sewer, I believe, is already out there because water goes up to, I know sewer goes out to the new humane shelter. I don't know if, I'm assuming water goes out there too. But that's the kind of thing I was looking at is infrastructure.
We're just to simplify it for my simple mind, we're basically proposing, or it's being proposed to use tax dollars to pay for a private investment. What's going to go with when they sell real estate off out there for a hotel and stuff, for big dollars? Where does that money going to go?
They own the property.
They own the property, that's right. Where's that money going to to then? Because you're asking a taxpayer to pay for that, but where's that money going to go when they sell off chunks of
Well, they
land?
get to keep that. But
They get to keep it.
But when the hotel, gas station, restaurant is built, that tax money goes into the TIF fund.
It does. But
But 80% of that,
They-
we're committing it to pay the bond.
To pay those bonds off.
All of the revenue from the sale of property and so forth on the south side of the road is part of their budget for developing the north side of the road.
again, it's being funded by the taxpayer to start with. But we're not going to see anything, we, as a taxpayer, we're not going to see anything back from that. It's going back in their pot for further development.
But it's
Yes.
revenue that we don't have now.
I understand that.
And the taxes on the actual auction part are not part of the TIF. That initial, or what's always been there, well, it's in a current TIF district, isn't it?
Yeah, that area is already TIF.
So,
But this will establish, the redevelopment commission is establishing a new TIF district that covers just the ASG project. Because there's only 10 years left on the current TIF district, and the TIF pledge is a 20-year pledge on this $18 million bond.
I don't, I don't think, I don't think that's the issue, because we all want good development. That would be more of a zoning issue or whatever, but I'm concerned about using taxpayers, the money that would come in to pay taxes for a private individual. That's the issue.
All right.
To benefit them.
but as a TIF district, you're not going to get any of that here for us to spend anyway.
Well,
But
That all stays with the TIF district.
right, but it would help build whatever roads or improvements or streets or
And
out there.
that, from this current TIF district, they have committed the, $600,000 to the renovation of County Road 56 from 11A over to 205. That is part of the money that
yeah.
has been committed to us.
Here's the other part of that calculation, though. If they're creating a new TIF district just for that property, for that. So the sports group doesn't get anything from what's currently being paid. They only get the incremental increase from their development. So if they don't develop the property, they get zip. Okay, so they're only getting that incremental 80% of that incremental increase that's generated from their development.
Mike, can you explain a little bit about the TIF districts and how that works, just for, again, anybody in the community that might be watching and interested about, like, okay, what is a TIF district? How does it work? And how does it benefit that project? And how does it benefit them as a citizen of DeKalb County? Sorry, I know that's a big, I'm sure it's a big question, but again, one of the things that we are always talking about is our citizens don't always understand the stuff that's happening here, and this is a great opportunity for us to explain, so.
Yeah.
Turn your mic on. Turn your mic on. Because I said, I can, but the mics,
We
they need to pick you
record
up. They- I have to watch all of you. Thank you.
You create the TIF district, the tax money generated by the new development in the TIF district goes into a specific fund. In this case, 80% of it's dedicated to repayment of bonds for the development. In most cases, or that's not the case, though it could be 70% or 60% or 80% be for infrastructure, often is in the TIF district. What happens is that then that tax money doesn't go, regular tax money is divided up among schools and libraries and county government, township government, so on and so forth. That doesn't happen in this particular instance. All that new tax money is dedicated to whatever the TIF district is contracted to do.
In this case, build their private building for their industry, for their.
It can only
In this
be
case-
used for the benefit of the TIF district.
Yeah, for the benefit of the district. So
And that's decided, that's a redevelopment commission decision.
Yeah,
They
that's a
want to-
redevelopment commission decision, yes. And the vote was 4-1, I believe. Interestingly, the one appraiser voted against it. I thought that was kind of,
We have other TIF districts, TIF district where SDI is. But I believe, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the TIF money there was dedicated to the infrastructure.
We paid
The
bonds.
roads,
We paid their bonds.
Yeah, but it was that bonding that built the roads and did all of the.
I don't know if I can answer that.
Right.
And they ran a line, I think their sewer runs up to Butler, and all of that was paid for. Yeah,
My concern right now is that we're asking the taxpayers of DeKalb County to pay for a private business and using tax dollars to do it there. And where are we going to draw the line when a new business comes in and says, well, hey, let's put a TIF district here, because we now have set a precedence where we can use this money to retire our bond. I mean, that, you talk, it's like spot zoning, you may have one here and one here and one here, depending on the favor of the commission here. This thing, I'm sorry, it stinks. It really does. This is using taxpayer money to fund a private project. What a sweet deal.
Well,
Can I get in on that?
Jump in.
yeah. And I've had a number of calls from developers in the county who've said, we've done this, this, and this, and never asked you for a penny, So there's some concern about that.
I think that's right, because I
There's-
think, I don't want us as a council to get caught up in this idea of picking winners and losers in our county, of who gets to win and who gets to lose on the tax dollars.
when the
not
Family
right.
Dollar one was completed, there was a calculation of the increase in income tax from employees. So there was significant number coming back to the county or the city, town, and county for property, or for income tax because of employment, people that work there. And that somewhat offset the fact that TIF money went to do infrastructure. Most of the TIF money went to do the infrastructure, such as sewer, improve the one roadway, extend water and sewer to them, and so forth. Which again, the extension of water and sewer and so forth benefited the town of Ashley because it opened up other ground for development and so on and so forth. So there was some payback. I don't know if that calculation was done here, but I can't imagine them having enough employees to generate much income
The
tax
other
revenue.
difference, the other significant difference in the SDI and the Family Dollar, I think, is we're talking companies bringing in and spending their own hundreds of millions of their own investment.
Correct.
In our county. They're bringing the money and spending it. This is, we don't have the money, so we're going to borrow it and have the TIF district pay it back.
I was told this, I haven't confirmed this number, that they committed just slightly over $1 million to a multi-million-dollar project. Do you have that
There
number?
is about just north of $1 million of owner equity in a $60 million project.
Yeah.
It is.
So does that all fall back on the city?
Huh. Yeah.
From my limited understanding, as I learn this process with everybody and being at the redevelopment commission, my limited understanding is that if no money ever gets made, brought in, whatever, that the county is not ever going to be responsible for paying back
And that
those
was
bonds.
that was my point.
Where
in
this-
that no matter what they do, the county doesn't have to pay any of these bonds back, period.
Well,
Well, and the thing
Well-
about Westview is, I believe that the city was not the initial developer of that park. Somebody else developed it, it bellied up, and the city ended up with it. And now the city wants to get rid of it.
well, no, in Westfield, and I spent about an hour on the phone with the economic development guy at Westfield. So Grand Park is generating enough revenue to cover the bonds there, but only because they have a big event arena that they use pretty frequently. They built an office or a business complex across the street, and it's in the TIF district too. But that's a different ownership structure than what we're talking about here.
And they've got the Colts training camp is
Right.
there also, so
Yeah.
they've got a big
So
client
it's a
there,
different
but
dynamic, and it's twice the size of the proposed project here.
I went down and toured the park when I was in Indianapolis earlier this summer, and it's, 400 acres? There isn't anywhere close to 400 acres out here.
And they were, however, able to attract their first hotel this year after 15 years of
Right.
operation.
Yeah.
The first hotel
That's-
was built by Grant Park after 15 years.
So it is correct that with the economic
You
development
say that
bond-
again. You say that again.
The first hotel that they attracted to build right there at Grant Park just got built this year, or last year,
So
after
it took them
15 years.
15 years to actually, after they built the park, to actually get their first hotel on
Or
site.
10, I'm not sure how long Grant Park's been there.
I don't know either, but they're
just under 15.
currently utilizing all of the development that's in Westfield itself. I mean, it's a
No, they,
very sprawled out. I mean, it's Fishers, Zionsville, Carmel, it's right in that whole.
there has been a lot of restaurants and fast food built in that area. Rick is correct in that with an economic development bond, there is no obligation for repayment if the developer defaults. So for instance, let's just pick round numbers, if the bond payment that they have to make, that they're obligated to, is $100,000 a year, and the 80% TIF pledge doesn't generate enough for them to pay it, they're on the hook for the extra. If they only generate $50,000 in TIF revenues at that 80% pledge, they're on the hook for the other 50%. If they default, they're on the hook for all of it. On the other hand, there is a perception of the county being involved in a private enterprise and sanctioning, if you will, that by going along with the bond issue. There's perception about the wisdom exercised in the making of those decisions. So, yeah.
Well, apparently we are the last people to get to vote on this. Yes, on the 27th of September.
There is another step that you didn't mention, which is the Economic Development Commission, which is the bonding authority that has to okay the economic development.
Yeah, so
bond.
all of these different entities get to vote on this. The commissioners we're the last ones. The commissioners, economic development, the redevelopment commission. Actually, this whole thing is in the Auburn ETJ, so the Plan Commission in Auburn is the one that gets to authorize whatever development they're going to do. So just know we're the very last ones.
And
If
Rick-
somebody kills it before it gets to us, it'll never get to us.
And what would we be voting on if the county doesn't have any kind of financial responsibility?
Apparently, our vote has to be there as part of this process, from what Rampola has put together.
You're pledging future tax revenue to go towards a private individual.
Yeah, and that's what
What
you're
you would be
signing off
voting
on is the TIF pledge.
And all of these TIF districts that we currently have, American Heritage over at the cruise park, the SDI, these are all, they've used those tax funds to develop the infrastructure, is what I'm,
Primarily, yeah.
the Family Dollar might be different, but the other ones, it's always been,
And they had structured something similar to this for New Millennium, and then it ended up that New Millennium went a different route on the project. But it was similar to this, but
okay, well, just to know, on the information that I forwarded to you, and there's more than just the timeline, that we are on the calendar for September 27th as to voting on these bonds. So. For the budget, yeah, they, initially they had us scheduled for October, and I came back and said, hey, we don't meet in October, so that's why it got moved to the 27th, so. All right, anything else for the good of the order?
Reminder to all of you, it is crucial this time of year to check your emails. I will be sending a lot. I have a lot of work to do in the next few days. I will be sending tons of information, different tidbits that you might need to know as presentations are coming, and probably even more some after that. But this year we have a lot more to know earlier than later.
And already on our council website for us is the agenda and the schedule, so.
Right.
Good.
I think, I guess last year, a couple of the department heads, when they were coming in, actually handed out to us their discussion. Is there a way that we can either have them print those and bring those? I just found it really helpful when I was going back to review all of my information about the budget, if they brought those and handed those out.
I can request it. It doesn't mean everybody
Yeah.
will have
I
anything.
don't know I've already met with a couple of my departments that have their handouts. So I don't know if any of the other departments have asked to meet with you before they did their budgets or not, so. Okay. Okay.
The Jobs Classification Subcommittee met, and we received two revised job descriptions in the Treasurer's Office. One was for a property tax revenue analyst, one was for the bookkeeper projects deputy, and we recommend that we accept those job descriptions as submitted. These also went to WIS, and one of those two, the bookkeeper projects deputy, was recommended to go to COMAT B. Is that right? Retitled? COMAT B.
All right.
For the 2023. This wouldn't take effect till 23.
Right. And just,
We need a vote on that.
well, and that'll have to
have to
talk
bring
about
it.
that next week, but as there's been other comments about somebody as a purchasing agent, another comment about needing a full-time plumber, electrician to help us maintain our buildings. And personally, and not speaking for the whole council, but because of what I believe are going to be excessive raises needed this year for 2023 in order to retain our personnel, that we not entertain hiring any additional staff. That the funds we have are going to have to be retained to keep our current employees, because we have made mention 3 years running that we need to pay particular attention to our employees and to make sure that they are being paid appropriately for today's current positions. So I would like to just say that all new employees, additional employees are off the table.
And that
That's
was-
my opinion.
That was the other thing that was brought up at the Job Classification Subcommittee was the Treasurer's Department wanting to have a project tax process manager added, and there was discussion whether the commissioners had approved that or not, and Mike, I'm not sure. Did the commissioners approve the creation of the new position in the Treasurer's office for a project tax process manager?
They approve the position contingent on if you would fund it.
Okay. So that'll be discussion for later.
Right.
Well, I would at least like to make the motion that we accept both job descriptions as submitted from the treasurer's office, and that we follow Wiss's recommendation that the bookkeeper projects deputy be moved from Comot A to Comot B.
We can't vote on that until I have a salary ordinance
Okay.
amendment. So I'll have to make that.
I withdraw the motion.
Yeah.
More to talk about next week. Be prepared to spend some long days, because I believe that we have enough items that are going to need discussion outside of the actual presentations that the people are making. Might want to also consider, usually we leave and go to lunch and come back as a break. We can, if everyone thinks it would be better use of our time, we can have food brought in to us and work through lunch. So think about that, and we'll decide that on our first meeting date.
I'll bring the Twizzlers.
He always brings all kinds
Bob
of
will
food.
have us all on a sugar high before noon. All right, anything else for the good of the order? They're down already.
Another meeting where? Drainage board's always on Thursdays.
All right, anything else for the good of the order?
So to answer your question, I have everybody each day, they're starting at 8:30. On Thursday morning, we have all three judges. They wanted earlier than 8:30, which we don't usually offer, so they may all show up early. So, and if there's anything that you guys want to talk about, you may not want to show up at 8:30. You may want to come earlier. I don't have that. On what calendar? When they submitted their request for the rooms, I told them they couldn't have that day because we have meetings. That's what I saw. Wednesday.
Anything else? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will make that motion and also thank the council for being patient with all of my questions today.
All right, that's how we learn.
Thank you. I will make the motion to adjourn.
Is it? And we have a motion and a second that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same. We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Uh-oh, here comes Andy. Look out.
I have a.
Uh-oh, look out, here he comes.
budget meeting's going to be live streamed?
I don't want